doing excellent. How are you?
I'm doing great. Sounds like it's probably a little warmer where you are than where I am right now. But
Yeah, we just got about 3 inches of snow back in Fort Wayne, and
yeah,
I'm in sunny San Diego right now. So
I envy you for that reason. But we'll go ahead and get started. I do want to thank everyone that is logging on to watch or listen to this edition of Trainer Talk today. Again, my name is Aaron. You've seen me before, but you might notice that we're changing it up a little bit. Today, joining me for for Trainer Talk is Dr. Michael Hartle. A lot of you should be familiar with him by now. He's an accomplished certified strength and conditioning coach. He's a chiropractic sports physician, certified nutritionist. He has a whole list of accolades and certifications, very educated in a lot of areas. But he's also the author of the recently released Kettlebell Strength Training Anatomy. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have him join me today for Trainer Talk, because we are going to talk about kettlebell training for athletic performance and really performance in general. So like I said, you probably saw maybe a couple months ago that Dr. Hartle was on for an edition of Author Talk, and you can actually go back and watch that. That's up on our YouTube page. So I do encourage you to go check that out. He gave a ton of great information for that. But today we're hoping to have a kind of a more casual conversation, I guess, and just talk about athletic training and performance as it relates to kettlebells. So I guess to get us started, I'm thinking of the very first time, or one of the first times that I introduced kettlebells and kettlebell training to athletes. I was put in charge of training a whole high school volleyball team. And a lot of them had never even seen a kettlebell before. So that was a little new to them. But we were doing some, summer off-season training to help them get ready for their fall season. And I was the only coach in charge of them. And again, this was like 15 to 20 girls. And I thought, well, I mean, they're in a jumping sport. They need to be explosive. I didn't really feel like it was appropriate, or we had the time to actually go through and teach them, hang cleans or barbell snatches. So I thought, hey, why not introduce kettlebells to them, and we can do some explosive movements that way. And I think it really worked out. Of course, the goal there was to try to teach them, power in through their hips and lower body, teach them hip extension. I think once they got past kind of some of the jokes that teenagers might make about doing kettlebell swings, they caught on pretty quickly, and it worked out pretty well. So I guess the takeaway there is that with a larger group trying to teach them posterior chain explosive power, it was a really efficient way and a quick way to kind of teach them that in using kettlebells. So I think the point there is that it's a really easy way to especially teach beginners, explosive power in that way. So what are your thoughts on that? What have been some of your experiences in that realm?
yeah, I totally agree with that. Volleyball players need to be able to have jumping ability, need to have shoulder mechanics, good healthy shoulder mechanics, a lot of overhead hitting with the ball. Obviously, the ball doesn't weight a lot, but when you think the speed and the velocity that they hit the ball with, need to have some good strength and stability and the whole shoulder mechanics aspect. Of course, I always default to the kettlebell deadlift. If no one's ever touched a kettlebell before, we go to the deadlift. It teaches whole body tension and teaches how to stand up with the kettlebell. Teaches you the hip hinge. A lot of people, when you look at an 18-month-old baby and they learn how to squat, they do a hip hinge perfectly. But sometime between 18 months old and maybe you're 35 when you start using kettlebells, you lose that ability because probably we sit too much or who knows what. So you need to learn how to do that. So it teaches that. Then you can go to the swing, and the get up is a great grind exercise. It's not a speed or dynamic exercise in that regard, but it teaches fantastic shoulder mechanics, thoracic mobility. So combining the kettlebell swing and the get up are probably two mainstays I would do with the volleyball team.
Right. I remember, so I'm curious, what is your experience in trying to teach, especially younger kids? Because I know you work with people from all ages, from, really young kids all the way up to senior citizens. But I guess my experience is some of the younger kids don't have the patience maybe to learn to get up. It's a more complex movement. But I also think that they think it's kind of cool once they're able to actually do that. So what have you seen in trying to teach some of those younger kids? Probably had a little better luck than I have in that.
Well, again, the one of the reasons I default back to the kettlebell deadlift or any deadlift in general, it's a very basic movement.
Yeah.
So you can do that. You don't have a lot of, you can't really mess that up too much.
Mm-hmm.
The kettlebell swing, you got some more areas there where people can mess up. Obviously, people can do that. The get up here, what I do with the get up, if you're teaching young kids, is I teach it in parts because the get up has about 7 different parts to it. So you maybe teach them, okay, we'll go floor to elbow
Right.
today. All right, this week we're going to go floor to elbow to hand. Then we're going to go to the half kneeling position, or even work from the top down. Maybe even just have it in the rack position and then go down to half kneeling and go back up. And then if they got the proper shoulder mechanics and ability to do so, then you can put the weight overhead. Of course, one caveat with the weight overhead is you got to look at how their torso is, what's going on with their abbies, as Pavel likes to say, what goes on with their lower back. Are they extend their lower back with the weight overhead? Okay, we don't want to do weight overhead. Let's keep it racked up and do that aspect.
I think that's one of the most interesting things you mentioned, going up overhead. And I use kettlebells for any type of carry because, I don't have to tell you, that's going to work on, shoulder stability, core strength, a whole host of things there. But you mentioned kind of staying balanced and staying stable. And I always think it's interesting when I see, especially an athlete maybe that has never done a lot of carries before, they always seem to be off balance. And why do you think it's kind of like they take off for a carry? Maybe they're doing a suitcase carry and they seem to lean to one side, obviously, but it's almost like they're compensating and leaning to the opposite side. Why do you think that is?
Well, part of that's because they're afraid the weight's going to hit the ground. And ideally, what I like to do is Paul Check gave me this little cue many years ago. He said, take a string, hang it down from a mirror, and put a washer at the end so it's like almost like a plumb line.
Okay.
And make sure that doing a suitcase deadlift, which is kind of like the part of the suitcase carry or the one-handed carry with that, make sure when you're standing up, everything stays nice and line, and you're giving yourself that initial feedback from the mirror just by yourself. And all of a sudden, if you see yourself doing this way, you can go back this way, go back to the center. So it's kind of like an asymmetrical loading. It's almost like a anti-rotation exercise, anti-extension, anti-lateral flexion. Right. So when you do in the carry, that's more of a progression from saying the suitcase deadlift.
All right. I know that you are, at least from your athletic background, coming from probably a different perspective than what I am. Right now I have a lot of actually volleyball players and tennis players. So definitely a little different from your experience with football. But I love the kettlebell right now, especially for those athletes, like you talked about, shoulder stability, very important for both of those. And also, to be honest, for a few different reasons, I don't like to teach the barbell Olympic lifts to my tennis players, just because of, they build up an adaptation in their wrist and their forearm, and I don't know, that can be a whole other conversation, but just kind of getting into that rack position is maybe a little tough for them. But so I guess, what are some of your experiences more specifically with that shoulder stability? Because I like to have them do maybe like a kettlebell, like overhead lunge, to kind of work two dynamics at the same time. That's one of them in particular that I can point to right now. So what are some of your experiences there?
Oh yeah, it's a great exercise, overhead lunge there. You can have it, obviously you can do a lunge and a goblet carry, you can do it in a rack, you can do it overhead. Overhead is definitely different because obviously you're having to somebody's doing a get up in a sense, because when you do when you come down from the get up, you're standing there with both legs together. You then bring one leg back to a reverse lunge and you go do that. So you can repeat that exercise multiple times for 3 or 4 reps, 5 reps, and then you can switch your hands. It's a great exercise with that. You can do even side lunges, diagonal lunges. So you can not just do the get up aspect, you can do different lunges because tennis is a dynamic sport. So, the guy hitting the ball back to you, hey, can you hit it over here? Because I need to work on that part of my body. They're gonna like, whatever, I'm just going to hit it over here, kind of thing. So it's definitely interesting with when you utilize it like that.
Now, of course, working with athletes, like they come in, it would be awesome if they were all healthy 100% of the time, but we both know that that's not going to happen. So they obviously come in with different injuries and everything. I'm interested in kind of your perspective. I know you did a webinar on with Human Kinetics on, kettlebells for rehab and injury prevention and injury reduction. So how would you kind of, put some of those components into your programming for an athlete?
Well, when an athlete comes to my gym, we do we call it rehabilitation assessment. We do an assessment.
Yeah.
Part of that assessment includes the FMS from Gray Cook and Lee Burton.
Yeah.
Part of it also includes some other tests that I do that. And based on that, so, you can look at someone and say, hey, you look like you're doing good, but all of a sudden they do an inline lunge, you get a 3 on one side, a 1 on the other side, like, whoa, but they walked into the gym moving perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So we go ahead and give them some corrective exercise, but at the same time, we'll give them some exercises that are not going to interfere with that aspect. For example, let's say someone's got a 3 and a 1 on the inline lunge. We're not going to give them some exercise like a kettlebell snatch,
right?
Because obviously they can't seem to handle it overhead. So maybe focus on the kettlebell swing and kettlebell deadlift, even the get up aspect. And then as they progress with that, we can get them into more of a dynamic snatch. For example, you can do once you get, it's not in the book, but you can do a progressive, you can do a kettlebell snatch and a lunge at the same time.
Okay.
That's interesting.
I love that you're talking about the get up and shoulder stability. It reminds me of, so I worked previously at a smaller college. It was a junior college, but now this happened before I got there, but I guess there was a golfer there, and, came back from their summer break, and they were doing some get ups, to kind of get ready for their fall season. And apparently it kind of slipped through the cracks that this golfer had shoulder surgery, like while he was gone, didn't bother to tell anyone, and thought that he could handle a super heavy weight in that get up position. Long story short, he ended up missing that next season too.
Wow.
So yeah, so kind of, I guess that speaks to the importance of trying to get all the information that you can from your athletes or from your clients, but just really the importance of using proper progressions, I guess, in starting off with a lightweight and making sure that you're doing everything the right way, because that's a pretty compromising position if you have a really heavy weight up overhead like that.
Well, yeah. When you think about it, and if you take your center of mass around your belly button,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you start taking, let's say I put a 50-pound kettlebell right here, and now I've raised that center, my body weight plus the kettlebell raises up a little bit. As I raise that bell or barbell or whatever weight over your head,
Mm-hmm.
that center of mass starts to come up. What usually happens is that someone will then extend their lower back, almost hyperextend it, and they'll lose their abs. So they need to be able to have the ability to keep the abs nicely braced, keep the back. So in a sense, it's as that weight's going overhead, nothing's changing from the rib cage down. If it does start to change, then you need to either modify the press, decrease the weight, or maybe move to something else that doesn't involve the center of that.
Yeah, I think so. You mentioned core strength right there, and I think that's something that maybe kind of gets lost in the use of kettlebells and how much you can actually work and improve your core strength with that. That you are far more an expert on this than I am. So, how does I guess the shape and kind of the structure of the kettlebell really help in that?
Well, the kettlebell, when I first bought mine, it was like an oversized paperweight. I didn't use it for a couple of years. It just sat in my gym. But, it's a cannonball with a handle. So when you think of it, it's kind of like the center mass is offset. If you look at a barbell, you got 7 feet of piece of steel. You got the weight evenly distributed on it. Everything works real good with that. But a kettlebell is offset. So when this kettlebell's up, say I'm holding it here, the bell is actually on this side of my forearm.
Right.
So with holding it there, I have to work harder to keep it closer to my torso versus letting it go away from me, which is, disadvantageous. So.
Okay. What are, I guess, some of the, go-to exercises for you? We mentioned core strength. One that's kind of standing out to me that I have pretty much all of my athletes do is I'll have them do a kettlebell series or a carry series, which I absolutely love. And I sold this, I think it was Dan John, who I first heard it from. But yeah, it's basically turns into a max distance carry where they'll pick up an appropriate weight. They'll go up overhead pretty much as far as they can, as long as they can stand to do that, come down to the rack position, as long as they can stand that, and then drop down to that suitcase position. And then of course they have to switch arms. A lot of them hate that, and they probably hate me for programming those for them. But I guess my reasoning for doing that is that, number one, you're going to build core strength. You're going to increase shoulder stability, shoulder strength.
Right.
And it also improves endurance just because you're going max distance, just kind of seeing how long you can go.
Right, and that's a great exercise. Do the more difficult one first, then the medium, and then the lighter one later.
Mm-hmm.
The only my concern is that make sure that you have a coach, such as yourself, watching them do it. So someone may have it overhead, and they start leaning this way or whatever else. They maybe have a cue word like say, drop the bell or whatever to the rack position, or just rack. And get down to the position. But yeah, that's a great exercise. That's definitely dealing with some endurance there. More endurance than I would have to do that. I don't have the patience to do something like that. But yeah, if you have an athlete which has a sport where like volleyball, where they're on the court constantly, and they're doing up the hits and spikes and everything else with that, they need to have that ability to be able to maintain that. That's one of the reasons why I'll go back to the get up, because the get up is a great exercise. Matter of fact, one of the progression I'll teach in the get up is that at each movement of the get up, take the kettlebell and do a full press.
Okay.
So you take it down, you bring it down, do a press, and then go move on to the next one. So that's more of a progression, obviously, to do with the kettlebell.
Okay. Would you ever have any of your clients do a carry series like that, or is that maybe a little
probably
more...
not my patients? Sporting teams that I work with, I could do that, but my patients would probably do that. But yeah, I could definitely. It's a good exercise to be able to do as far as do the 3 inside 1 exercise or set or rep by itself.
Okay, I guess. So I guess one of the other exercises that I love to do in a way to kind of progress swings, even, I don't know how much you've done this, but just more of like a band resisted kettlebell swing, where you kind of loop the band through the handle of the bell, and then obviously have to be careful, but you're kind of standing on the band, or make sure to have that anchor down. I know that's one that I do. I don't know your thoughts on that. So how do you kind of feel about that, or a way to make those kettlebell swings more explosive?
Well, it's interesting because I've never done the band. I would just go up a kettlebell size to make it more difficult with that. You heard of Louis Simmons, I assume?
Yeah.
West Side. Okay, so it's kind of his as far as combination aspect. So when I was training West Side for powerlifting, we do it the bench press. So I had bands on the bar. So as the bar got locked out, it would get more tension on the bands, making it more difficult. So it's a good idea to do that. I would caution someone doing that. Say someone who listens to this, buys my book, has never done kettlebell swings. Don't do that resisted band stuff for maybe a good solid year or so after you get a few 10,000 reps underneath your belt. But yeah, if you can do it properly, as the kettlebell goes up during the kettlebell swing, there's more tension on the band, making the kettlebell, in a sense, weigh more than it was at the bottom at the height pass.
Yep. Well, I guess, what are some of the challenges that you've seen, and maybe trying to progress younger kids, younger athletes through different kettlebell exercises?
Well, if I had, like, say, a group of 15 and 16-year-old boys or girls doing it, I would just basically stick with the basics. I would do the kettlebell deadlift, the kettlebell get up, kettlebell swing. If you got the good shoulder mechanics, maybe the kettlebell press down the road. I probably would not do the kettlebell snatch till further down. Maybe they've been with me for a year. Now, that's different. So, like, for that reason, I'm in San Diego this weekend. Is tomorrow I'm teaching the level 1 SFG kettlebell certification. So right away, these people have already practiced the kettlebell snatch. So on tomorrow's afternoon, Saturday, we're teaching them the kettlebell snatch, but we're going to be enhancing their already current movements with it, because there's a kettlebell snatch test on Sunday they have to be ready for. So they're going to be already trained for that. So they already have some background in it. Someone who doesn't have a background, I'm going to be perfectly fine with doing, Pavel called it simple and sinister, swings and get-ups. And then after that, maybe move to presses. Maybe after that, do some cleans and stuff like that, and squats, and then eventually do the kettlebell snatch down the road. But I would just keep it simple, keep their attention, because, kids nowadays have obviously this phone I'm looking at in front of me right now. They have these phones. They're always on the phones. They have great thumb strength. Their adductor pollicis are great. Not sure why that's going off in my background there, but I must have said something about Happy New Year or something. But anyways, regarding that, so they have great thumb strength, but they need to develop the basic aspects. And those are still, whether you play football, golf, tennis, volleyball, whatever, those are still sports as they were 50 years ago. The mechanics of the sport itself hasn't really changed. So now we need to keep them strong for that, to be able to do that.
I think that's a really good point, and you know, making sure that you have the basics down first. When I was thinking about this in our discussion here, one of the things that kind of stood out, you know, thinking of my own programming, like um, I love for athletes to be able to do like a trap bar deadlift, but you know, I don't always trust some of them to go to the trap bar right away because they obviously, you know, have pretty high ambitions and want to load up the bar quite a bit. But no, so I will always start them with just like regular kettlebell deadlift and make sure that their
Right.
form is great, their movement quality is outstanding. And I think it, to your point earlier, I think that really does a good job of, you know, kind of setting the foundation for other things that they can do later on. You know, puts them in the proper position. They're able to progress the weight a little easier than you would if you had a bar there too. So I really love that point then.
Totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. Basics first.
Yep, absolutely. What has your experience been? Usually when I have some athletes do carries, they ask if they're supposed to use dumbbells or kettlebells. I, I always say, sometimes I say it doesn't matter, but then I'll usually point to the kettlebells. And the reasoning for that is, and you can definitely offer a lot more insight to this, kettlebells seem to be easier to grip. Now, I know we're working on grip strength, but for a lot of them, they seem to be easier to grip than dumbbells. Why is that?
Well, usually the shaft that's between the two ends of the dumbbell is a smaller diameter. The diameter in a
Okay.
kettlebell handle is a little bit thicker. So when you have the dumbbell handle in your hand, it sometimes could either be somewhat painful, not painful, but uncomfortable.
Hmm.
But again, obviously the kettlebell handle is bigger and thicker, so it's easier to hang on to. It's just more advantageous device to be able to carry with that, and you just basically set it down. When the dumbbell, if someone drops it, it could drop on one end or the other, could break the
Hmm.
dumbbell. Kettlebells, I've never seen a kettlebell ever break, ever, ever, ever. So even back when I used to compete in track and field, I used to
Yeah.
take the kettlebell, I used to do hammer throw and discus and shot. I used to take it and throw the kettlebell behind me and all that stuff, landed on a
Okay.
gravel driveway, never had a kettlebell fall apart of me. Dumbbells would probably break left, right, and center. So it's probably
I don't know what I don't know what my reaction would be if I actually saw a kettlebell break.
yeah,
That's
exactly. I'd be like, whoa. Matter of fact, when I started doing that, I called the manufacturer of the kettlebell that I had, and I said, "Hey, has this ever happened?" And he said, "No, it's never happened." But he said, "If it does, send it back." I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to ship it back. I'll take photos of it, but would you send me?" He goes, "He'll send me a new one," but never had to do that. So
right. No, that's crazy. That's crazy. I guess so. If we're talking about athletes and specific athlete performance using kettlebells, like what would be like a good complex? Say you're trying to build aerobic capacity for a strength and power athlete. What would be, if maybe people are listening or watching? What would be a good go-to complex? I know it might depend on sport, but
right.
just kind of in general.
Well, let's say you got an athlete that knows how to do a kettlebell snatch and a kettlebell swing, just
Mhm.
alternating one hand swings, or even you could do two hand swings, one hand swings, and then you could do kettlebell
Okay.
snatches.
Okay.
If you're highly advanced, you can even do double snatches. But I would caution someone doing double snatches until you have a couple years of kettlebell use underneath your hands.
Yeah.
But just doing single arm snatches and just alternating. Maybe taking 30 seconds between sets. Do right hand 10 swings, take 30 seconds rest. Left hand 10 swings, 30 seconds rest, and then switch snatches. That's a good complex back and forth through 3 or 4 rounds. Maybe work up to a total of anywhere between 60 to 100 reps.
Okay.
And you can also then decrease your rest time. That would also be you would enhance your metabolism very strongly. You would increase your fat loss. You would help as far as strength. I think it was Ace that did a study or figured out that kettlebell snatching, the only thing that could be generating more calories burned or whatever it was, I may be losing some of the information here,
Okay.
was cross country skiing uphill.
Oh, well,
So just think about cross country skiing uphill like that. You only do that in the Olympics when they
right.
when they do the cross, and they're just like running up the hill with their cross country skis, which is just kind of like mind boggling to me.
Right.
But
I
it
don't think I'd
basically
want
was
to do
saying, yeah,
that.
high intensity kettlebell snatches are fantastic for the body, but then you interlace them with as far as kettlebell swings, and it works fantastic with that.
Speaking of the kettlebell snatch, like I love a good kettlebell snatch, but part of the issue that I run into, or that I hear some clients speak to is that they hate it when, obviously the bell like kind of bangs on the back of their wrist. What is the, is there a good fix for that? Is there a way around that?
Yes, work with a certified instructor to teach you how to do it, because when I do it, it basically lands almost just like
Okay.
that. It does not bang
Yeah.
my wrist. One of the things in a nutshell is we kind of punch through the handle.
Okay.
So as the bell's coming up, and this is very in a nutshell, as you bring the bell up through the kettlebell swing and you go through the kettlebell clean and you go to the kettlebell snatch, it just naturally floats back there. I don't even have a red mark, nothing, after doing 100 snatches like that. So
Okay.
when you go from people talking about banging, what I would do is work, and go to someone who, whether through online or in person, just find
Mhm.
a kettlebell instructor to teach you how to do the kettlebell snatch. It's the technical aspect of a kettlebell snatch is like up here, kettlebell deadlift is like down here.
Right.
So as you go up that technical aspect there, it would behoove you to spend some time, maybe just an hour or two,
Mhm.
maybe pay someone $200 or 100, whatever, $150 to do 2 hours of training, and then all of a sudden go back and do your snatch training, and all of a sudden, boom, now it's fixed, versus developing problems
Yeah.
with your radius and your ulna as far as developing other issues down the road. A little bit of money spent here would have great returns down the road.
Absolutely. Is any part of that, and I think that's an excellent point, excellent advice. Is there anything to the weight of the kettlebell? I know, especially I see it maybe more in like a kettlebell clean. The kettlebell kind of flops up, and I usually think that weight's probably too light for them in that case if it's just kind of flopping around up there. Is that the same with a snatch? I think we lost your audio a little bit.
Are we back?
Yeah, yeah,
Good. Sorry about
you're
that.
good. Oh, no problem.
This left one falls out of my ear every so often, so I had to put it back, and I must have turned it off. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
But anyway, so as you do the kettlebell clean, you should be able to do a 48 kilo, which is 106 pounds,
Mhm.
or a 12 kilo, which is 26 pounds. And once you're trained in this, and do it in the same manner.
Right.
But yes, and then sometimes for someone who's using too light of a kettlebell, it'll just flop up because they're using too much energy to
Mhm.
get that bell up there. So they need to, it's almost like taking a volume knob and say their volume's at 10 as far as the intensity, bring it down to a 3 for the 12 kilo, and then they can
Okay.
bring it back up to a 10 for as far as a 48 kilo. But when you're someone who's new to it, they don't understand that, so they want to be able to not bang their forearms and hurt their
Right.
arms quite a bit. But kettlebell snatch, I'd say yes and no. I mean, it depends. You can go too heavy, and then you end up jamming up your shoulders, your lower
Right.
back, your core, all that kind of stuff. If you go too light, yeah, the same issue can happen as far as the kettlebell clean. But then once you clean up their technique, should be good to
Okay.
go.
I guess back to your point again, find someone that's certified in kettlebell training if you're having issues with it.
Yep.
And, yeah, spend a little money. If you're listening to this, get a hold of Dr. Hartle. Like he can help you out with that for sure. Time is really flying by, and I know we didn't want to run too long on this. Yeah, I definitely appreciate your time in jumping on to talk about this a little bit and more of a conversation. I'll let you kind of wrap everything up here and kind of your, I guess, biggest takeaways as far as kettlebell training for athletes.
First off, if you have athletes, if you have the ability to do a quick assessment, find an assessment that works for you and your coaches, and do that, have someone else do that. Get someone who knows how to use kettlebells to coach your athletes. Don't have Joe Bob's grandfather who is a farmer. No offense against
Right.
farmers, love farmers. But again, help out with the strength training aspect, because it's like, well, what's that cannonball the handle thing? Why are you doing that thing, kind of thing? So find someone who knows something about it. They don't necessarily have to be certified or anything else with that. That'd be helpful, but again, doesn't necessarily have to be there. But again, find someone who does that. That's probably the biggest takeaway, is have someone who knows what they're talking about, has spent some time in the trenches, can do this stuff very well, and then go ahead and teach it. It's probably the number one thing. Second thing, as far as the athletes, keep the basics. When you're working with high school kids, teach them the
Yeah.
basics. There was a former master instructor with Strong First who taught his football players swings and get-ups, and that's all he did for the entire football team. These are
Okay.
kids who, could have been certified to have great technique, but he taught them swings and get-ups. And of course, when you do swings and get-ups, there's different variations of them and all that stuff. And so he ended up having them, use it quite a bit.
Okay.
So.
Excellent info there again. Like I said, if you're listening to this, Dr. Hartle was on previously for an edition of Author Talk to kind of talk about his book. Have it right here. Again, grab your copy. Excellent discussion today, but you can learn so much more. Of course, look into all of Dr. Hartle's resources online and on his Instagram page and everything too. But I would say definitely pick up your copy of the book there, and you can learn so much more there. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Hartle. I definitely appreciate your time, and have a good rest of your weekend.
Aaron, thank you very much, and everyone have a strong day.
Very good.